we're really excited to have you all here. Kind of I feel like it's not the first time I've said it, but a long time in the making. Really kind of diving into this property and this project. So my name is Lindsay Tunis. I'm a restoration ecologist and I'm supporting this project as an enthusiastic partner. So I don't represent any of the entities that are part of the primary partnerships. I'm here kind of as a neutral. I'm actually one of you. I'm just really excited about this project and have pestered my way into it over the many years. But so I have the luxury of getting to share today's kind of opening comments with you and setting up how we want to facilitate this meeting. And the first part of it is going to be me talking. That's the short first part of it. And the rest of it is really going to be about getting input from the community on a variety of topics. We've attempted to structure some group exercises to kind of lead us for identifying our group's top priorities. We're having a meeting on site on Saturday. So if you're interested in visiting with us twice, we're going to do a lot of the same things, but it'll be on site. So if you haven't been to the site in a while, or you've never been to the site, or just want to join us, we'd welcome you there. We're going to do very much a similar exercise and bring all of the comments and feedback together. So this project, the Louis Robidoux Parkland in Pecan Grove, and as it says right there, community enrichment and engagement, land revitalization, creek restoration, sustainable agriculture, and wildlife rehabilitation. That's a lot. That's a lot. Each one of those things in and of itself is a conversation we could have over an extended period of time, and now we put all of them together. So that's why your input is needed and why this kind of community gathering is so important. So let's dive into that. So meeting opened, done. 5:45 to 6. So quick introductions. I would like to identify all the folks in the room that are here representing the project so that you know who you can ask questions to if you need anything. So I already introduced myself. I'm going to just point at the people I see. Chris.
And Chris Jones, I work over at San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. Thank you all for coming.
Man, do you want to go next?
I'm Annie Carter, I'm with the Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. We also have Crystal Valenzuela from Rainier DEP and Navi Preciado from IDRPPG. Thank you everybody for being here.
Yeah. And then Marcus, you want to go next?
Yes, I'm Marcus, I'm a biologist.
Perfect. And then Eric, I see you checked out there.
Eric Peterson, I'm working with the consortium to help use the landscape architecture and architecture to the project.
Perfect. You want to grab? So you have a lot of different, the team here represents a lot of different, kind of objectives and partners on this project, and together we're going to work through this conversation together. So we already mentioned we're going to do some group activities, and then we'll wrap up with some next steps. Our target was to be done around 7, but we are here and interested in having conversations. So if we run long and you're interested in staying long, at this point in time, we're not kicking anybody out. But 7 is what we were shooting for. We'll see how efficient our conversation goes. So just as a reminder, for those of you who may not be familiar with this project, we have 5 primary partners for the Louis Robidoux Parkland and Pecan Grove project, not just the master plan, but the property as a whole. So we've got Huerta de Valle, whose goal is to cultivate an organization of community members to grow organic crops, working towards sustainable community empowerment and health. And so you're going to see that each one of these partners is unique, but you're also going to feel kind of a complementary flavor, and that's one of the things that's exciting about this project. Our other partner, I don't know that we have anybody representing them tonight. Is ignore that. Is Inland Empire Resource Conservation District. We have lots of people representing. So that was Mandy and her team. So IDRCD is a public agency. They're headquartered in Redlands and focuses on open space preservation, wildlife rehabilitation, and education and outreach to over 1,300 for residents within a 1,300-mile square area. It's a really big, jurisdiction. They do a lot of really exciting things. Here's who I might not have any representatives tonight. So Orange County Water District is our third partner, and their focus is providing reliable, high quality water supply in a cost-effective and environmentally responsible manner. And most importantly, they're committed to doing sound planning and investment, high standards for water reliability, water quality, and environmental stewardship. So once again, you'll see that there's overlap and also unique aspects to each of these partners. San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District, and tonight that, as Chris mentioned, where Chris is representing. So this is our regional agency, who's planning long-term water supply for the San Bernardino Valley. They are the lead agency for the Upper Santa Ana HCP, or Habitat Conservation Plan, and are currently focused on protecting, enhancing, and restoring habitat, while also streamlining permits, for a large group of water resource partners within the Upper Santa Ana River. And then last but not least is Sunshine Haven Wildlife Rehabilitation. So their focus, and one of the things that makes them unique, is they focus on all species rehabilitation. Native, non-native, amphibian, bird, reptile, you name it, they're gonna work on trying to help rehabilitate it. So I want to bring us to why are we doing a master plan? And hopefully we've already kind of set that stage. The concept of a master plan, and I'm gonna, Eric, feel free to chime in if I completely slashes, but it's the idea of bringing lots of different ideas together to create a shared vision. So how do we do that? It's not just a shared vision for the partners. We also want to be thinking about the community and the larger stakeholders. And so we want to understand the needs and wants of that group, determine kind of physically, geographically where these things, features exist on site, better understand our existing infrastructure and constraints, look at our natural resources and our cultural resources. And we want to determine how all of these interact with each other and create potentially even more opportunities. So when we talk about sustainable agriculture, we talk about community education, and we talk about ecosystems. Those three things, although they sound unique, can really interact with each other. And so once again, that's what we're attempting to do, is bring that shared vision. And at the end of the day, we want to develop a work plan through that master plan that focuses on a 5-year and a 20-year time step. So that really sets the property up to have those next steps moving forward and to be able to report out to the community. Here's what we're doing in the short term. Here's what we're doing in the long term, and it allows things to be actionable. Quick visual. So this was an original concept when this partnership came together and pursued the grant through Riverside County Parks. Put together an initial vision, very high level, just kind of putting, pen to paper, here's our initial thoughts. But that's what today is about, is moving past that initial, we put something on paper and let's really flush that out. So we're going to talk about that more. So who else will be coordinating this? And this is going down once again, why are we talking about a master plan? We've already talked about our partners. We've talked about you, the community. But here are the other entities, and I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I actually really would appreciate you taking a look closely at this and letting us know if we're missing anything. So before I move past this slide, I want to point out a few things. We're going to have some internal group discussion, but we know that not everybody's comfortable speaking out loud in a group. So we want to make sure that you feel comfortable providing feedback in whatever way suits you best. So we have comment cards. There's some here, there's some at the front. We have a box that you can drop them in. Here's said box. We will move that toward the front so that it's out of the way. If for some reason comment card's not handy to you, there's actually lines on the back of the agenda. You're welcome to write notes, draw a picture, whatever works for you, and put it in the box. You're also welcome to just come to speak to one of the representatives who's here through the night if you want to share something, and we can make note of that. But with that in mind, our first request is, if you see a group missing from up here, potentially a local community organization, a recreational group, someone that should be involved in this conversation that perhaps we haven't identified, please let us know. And if it's not today, there is a place on the website where you can also go and put in comments or contact somebody. So we really want to make sure we're capturing all those voices. Okay, so big picture though, the who is landowners. We've got our regional tribes, we've got community-based organizations, local agencies and organizations, including many who will be giving permits or some form of authorization for proposed work. And then once again, you and your neighbors and the larger community as a whole. And we already mentioned this. Anybody have any questions? I just want to I'll just keep rolling if I don't pause. So any major questions at this point in time? Otherwise I will keep rolling. Yes.
So just, maybe you've gotten to this, but I'm just wondering where's the source for the funding? And what sort of You said a 20-year duration, what's the amount you've got over that?
So there is actually a slide that's going to show some initial funding. I don't think the answer to what do we have over 20 years exists. In fact, I think even though we're talking about a 20-year plan, I think many aspects of this project have an even longer vision. So a lot of this master plan will not only dictate what is the vision, but part of it will then inform what is the funding that needs to do this. And so that's where those partners come in, both the immediate partners as well as other outside partners that may be interested in supporting this project. But there's a slide that we can touch on that a little bit more. Very good question. So wanted to make sure everybody is aware of what the master plan kind of geographic setting is. What are we talking about? And it is not just thanking us. We need to tell them to do that. It is not just the Louis Robidoux Parkland and Pecan Grove, which is the yellow box right there. It is also these other red parcels, which include the Santa Ana River. There you go, actually flowing the other direction. So flowing this direction downstream. Just I always get it wrong which way water flows. But we also have portions of the project overlap with Rancho Cucamonga Regional Park. So that's another kind of geographic place for you to put your mind in as you look at maps. And there's actually at least there's an unnamed tributary, I believe, that runs through Rancho Cucamonga Park. Thank you very much. And then there is a named tributary which parallels Louis Robidoux, which is what Sandy Slope Creek. Which most of you might think of as a ditch because it is only soft bottom for a very short portion, but it is nonetheless very important and a part of this project. And so those are kind of our natural resources. And then, so we are going to be kind of looking at this in two different levels of intensity. The bulk of the work that we're talking about, or at least the current investment and educational opportunities, really focuses on Louis Robidoux Park and the Pecan Grove. That is like our really focused location, but we are exploring how does that connect to the larger geography? What do trails look like already? How do we make sure that we're continuing to stay connected, or where are appropriate connections if they don't exist? We're talking about potentially resource restoration. So where there may be opportunities for targeted restoration for species or habitats, we're talking about connection for cultural resources, and so on. But we're going to be looking at these two at the master plan and kind of those two levels of intensity. So a more focused intensity on the park and a different level of intensity at the larger area. But we would very much, if you have an opinion on either or, are welcome and interested to hear about that today. Anything missing from any partner that so I'm not going to read all this to you. But what I want you to take away from this side is there are a lot of goals, and I'm sure this doesn't even cover all of the goals if we were really to start breaking them out. But you'll see everything from education opportunity, which is I think a unanimous theme throughout all of the partners, outdoor facilities, preservation and enhancement of the Pecan Grove, historical artifacts and knowledge, creating a visitor space, a space for gathering, a space for meetings, potentially office space, and also restoration of natural resources. So these are, big picture goals. And I imagine some of these goals are going to evolve through the master plan, because some of these are going to come together, create a more kind of comprehensive single goal, and others will potentially be added. So this is our first 5 years. So we're in 2023 now. I think January might almost be over. It's been a crazy January. I don't know about you guys, but it's been a crazy beginning of the year. But we want to make sure you guys are aware that work actually started a few years ago when this team came together and was awarded this lease. Work immediately started, including a few meetings, work on site to better understand how we could ensure that it's protected and managed in its current condition as we move forward with planning. So there's a lot of things that have already happened. So this slide really shows what happened up until December of 2022. And then there are some things that are in progress down here. So developing the site master plan, site-wide water reestablishment. So really just understanding our infrastructure. How do we bring water where we need to bring water? Evaluating where and how agriculture is appropriate. And then really thinking about that Pecan Grove and developing a management plan for it. And completing some of the highest safety priorities. So we're talking about a site where we're encouraging and ultimately want to have a lot of public visitation, so we need to make sure the site is safe. So a lot of the site management that's already happened is really focused on safety. So this is what's happening in the remaining basically 2 years. So we're already basically rolling into our year 3 right now. So we've got general site development, kind of operations and planning, Sunny Slope Creek restoration design and permitting. What does that look like? Really fleshing out sustainable agriculture and starting to initiate some of the first initiatives that we envision might come out of that. And then education, really setting up that site education program and fleshing that out more. So dollars. So spend to date just under $600,000. This includes building renovation, a lot of site cleanup, the regular volunteer events to help keep the site in as clean a way as possible prior to kind of more intensive management. There's been some purchase of equipment and rental, and then contracting and grant applications. And then you can see the planned spending through 2025. So that is in the next 3 years, the estimated investment is over $5 million. So that's just what's the front end investment. There is additional pursuit of grant funding. There actually already has been some pursuit and award of grant funding. And so I must say that if there's anything that these partners do well, and in particular IERCD and Valley District, they get grants. Better than I think if there was a star for successful grant writing, it would probably be these entities, which is really exciting because we want to be able to bring as many dollars to the project as possible and allow the vision that everybody has to happen. So once again, the master plan will ultimately inform how that investment needs to grow and move forward. But right now, there's already a large commitment made for the next few years to kick off that first 5 years. Okay, next 20 years. Once again, I'm not going to read it to you. 20 years is a long time, but there's big vision for this site. And this is where, once again, the master plan comes in today. So we've got general site development, operations planning support, just how does the site function on a day-to-day basis? We've got education programs, and in those 20 years, really formalizing and establishing that, whether it's with colleges, K through 12, general community engagement, a lot of focus on education. The maintenance of Sunny Slope Creek, and if additional restoration happens in our larger master plan, the ongoing maintenance of that, and then sustainable agriculture, continuing to kind of revisit the program that's initiated and make sure that it's staying fresh and relatable to the community. So again, why are we developing a master plan? I wrote it here, so I'll have to actually remember. To create a shared vision. And for me, that's where I think this project is most exciting, because I don't think there's anything much more powerful than a lot of people coming together with different opinions and creating something that everybody can buy into. So it's creating this shared vision of from partners, from our community and our stakeholders. And so once again, we're going to be looking at this overall property and with a focus on the Louis Robidoux Parkland. And with that, I think we're going to dive into trying to make this a little more interactive. I'm going to take a pause in a moment to see if there's any additional questions, and then I'm going to set us up for our kind of first group exercise, and we'll go from there. So what we're hoping for today is your ideas, your needs, and your wants. And I think that it's important to differentiate between needs and wants. We all have our wants, like I want a Ferrari, but I really need a car. I don't actually. In case anybody's shopping. But there's a difference, right? We have, if there were no limits, what could we do? But we also have our bare minimum, like I need to have access to this site. I need my children to have access to the site. I need to go to this site safely. So as you're thinking of your comments today, I think if you can think about it in those two categories, that does not mean you should not put your want out there. We want to hear it. We are a group of big thinkers and generally not scared of pursuing things that might sound more intimidating to other groups. But we also want to know your need, like what do you need from this site for it to be most functional for you? Okay, so with that, we're going to dive into our first exercise. And actually, sorry, before we dive, any big picture questions?
How come you don't want a Ferrari?
I used to want to go to the bed. It's always evolved, so I don't know what. I'm actually happy with Yes.
Just,
Sue
just-
one.
yes.
Yes.
Just to be sure that equestrians
Yeah.
and horseback riding, all of that is within.
I'm gonna say yes, and that is, I'm hoping that's what you represent today, and we're very much looking forward to hearing about how the site's already being used in that way and how the surrounding area is. So, yeah, there's nothing, I'm not gonna say there's nothing that's off the table. We have talked about this site being kind of more of a passive use in the sense of like, we don't expect motorized bikes or maybe even bikes in general at this site because of how the hope for this site is that literally kids can run from one side to the next, you know, without a parent shadowing them, like that can be really kind of a free space. That does not mean that there's not gonna be an actual, you know, nothing's set in stone and there's no such thing as never, but yes, equestrians are definitely something we've talked about and are looking forward to hearing some of that.
Well, and that was a good thing to add, and we missed it on stakeholders who we're gonna be working with to get more feedback. As we also missed for Mountain Discovery Center, I'm sorry, Lance. Yeah, but I really should have had on that slide, but those are-
I was gonna add some more to that, to community groups that.
Yes, so if you have a commuter, we will, maybe Chris or Marcus will find a piece of paper, a solid piece of paper that you can come to us and we can get missing community groups. If you have a contact name, if you just have a general name, like I think Sue lives on this street, go see if you can find her. Pick Sue. But you give us what information you have about that group and we'll do our darndest to bring them into this, so.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Really good.
So. I'm sorry, here in a little capacity, I'm a resident here.
Yeah.
So I have to be stating this that a lot of the community do with respect to just the facilities you had here on earlier. But I also represent the Tri-County Conservation. Which is Michigan and Coral Panhandle River Drainage County Park. And one of the sort of overarching concerns we have actually would be the larger footprint you have here. And so to that, my first question would be, what is flood control's attitude about this? Is this going to be left in a riparian state that will support things like southwestern willow flycatcher and leaf-bell vireo, and the wildlife that would be in the riparian habitat?
For sure.
Is that on the chopping block, or is this something that's in the dialogue about the impact of all that?
Sure, so I think that the details of that question are actually farther down the line. In the short term, I'll say that this is a group of people focused on ecological restoration. And that our priority is to maximize the benefit for the resources for the ecosystem across the board. And at this point in time, I don't know that we have any reason to suspect that any additional flood management would be required in this area. If anything, I think most of the work we would be proposing, as we've thought about it now, from a restoration perspective would alleviate flooding and actually have more natural space, but also reduce
I
that.
think we're all on the same page there,
Yes.
stuff like, but there's you watch what flood control wants to do, you know, and there's
Well, and that's why
the
these,
Army Corps of Engineers mentality, and let's just clear out the volume changing vegetation.
correct, yes, and so this area, I mean, the reason this master plan space is defined is because these are parcels that we have direct oversight and ability to kind of, drive toward that vision. These are not properties that have been designated, for flood management by the Corps or any other flood district. So that's one of the reasons this planning area exists. And we are going to talk about restoration more for sure. So, and did you write down his organization?
Yeah.
Okay,
We have been talking to the county, they're aware and supportive of what we're talking about doing out there on Sunday, so we're at the luxury of being at the end of the line, so we're not like in the middle of everything, so they're really excited about it, and I think they utilize the site too, so they want to see us doing good things down there, right?
You're-
Reach out.
oh, sorry, what?
Reach out is a nonprofit organization that we run Healthy Rural Valley. We have 5 different teams and they're all run by community members. So we do mural, community gardens, community policy, different things that we're doing small, working with small businesses, so.
Wonderful.
Aren't you guys doing an event on Saturday here? They're partnering with the library and they're doing the board center.
No, that's wonderful. And I'm sorry, your hand's been up for once.
That's all,
Yes.
okay, I'm just.
I wondered from a perspective of having been here in this area for 30 years plus, that there has been a change in the safety issues along the river bottom. And I wondered, not gonna get into any of the, it's this fault, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Only knowing that there might be some input from the group of county sheriffs and the citizens patrol type of situation
Sure.
that could get pulled in as a, like a think tank. On once this beautiful thing holds together,
Sure.
what we're facing as far as safety issues.
And I think safety is very important.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know, knowing people that have been in those places and having known them for years, also knowing the teenagers that some people I know grew up around and some of the people I knew might have been involved in is going down and using that area to hang out on the old trestles, and there was gang fights and activity. And so with knowing that and knowing how beautiful it is also taking the Girl Scout troop down there and going with the local schools for events and having summer programs that this woman here beautifully ran, wanting that back again is a stronger feeling than worrying about what it might look like down the line. Because things can happen out of our control, but having information from that source to me would be huge. In this whole idea of how safe it would be for those families and what we could do to kind of pull them in.
Sure that, yeah. Yeah, I think I'll say a few things and then I don't know if anybody else has. So safety has been a continual conversation, not just for this project, but for the river, and both Chris and myself and many of Mandy's staff and Marcus has spent a lot of time in the river bottom and have experienced our own safety moments. And so we're keenly aware of how high risk things can be. Good news is this site is kind of in a unique location, and because of it, it's in such close proximity to a community, and in many ways is, even though it's been closed, it's still being used by, general recreationalists. It has not seen that same kind of grow out of high risk. That being said, things change quickly. So one of the biggest ways, at least as we've talked in the river, we believe of ensuring some safety is actually to have use. The more people that are present at a site, the more people using and enjoying the site, the more eyes on a site, the better. But we also have to make sure that those eyes are safe. So I think one of the first things that's already happened is there is a caretaker back on site. And Mandy, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more just about kind of currently how we're tackling things, but then Chris, I also thought you might mention the ranger funding stuff.
Well, I mean, I think having somebody on site full time, as Lindsay said, has made a huge difference. I know number one, has met Aaron, absolutely Solaris, and then Aaron. He's actually an IRC. And
Yeah.
oh, cool, all the time, and know a lot of the community to being there. And then getting them to the ways reliably, something follows. Having regular work days. IRCP and partner staff are on site multiple days a week now, and so to Lindsay's point, I think that's made a really big difference. But certainly there are still concerns, and I think some of the first things you said about a need is, the last thing you would want is to be having programming on site and have people feel unsafe, or people avoid the site for any reason other than they're too busy to get out there. So that is going to remain a very, very focal point of master planning. How can we keep working on safety? What are our goals? And Valley District is funding its goals right now.
We funded patrol, so a couple new positions with Riverside County Park Rangers, which is also have a presence on site, going around, uniform guys, and marked vehicles, just having a presence at this site and a bunch of other restoration sites we have up and down the river. So hopefully that'll help, this site in particular, but other ones as well. And if y'all are seeing stuff out there that's not supposed to be happening, let us know. Sure, from there and we'll do that.
And then I just wondered, because I watched Fairmount Park over this period of time, the ebbs and flows of it, and I've seen how it has improved so much. And there's always gonna be issues in a public space, but it seems so much better, and I thought, gosh, how did they do that? Because people are going back down there and spending time with their children, and it's new materials, and it's exciting to go there again. So that's what I was thinking, there's gotta be something ahead of time, the feeling that with all of this being put in there, that that's the kind of place that we're looking forward to.
And
Great.
we're also involved, you guys are lucky to be here in Riverside. In Riverside County, there's a huge push, like at all levels of government and different things to like really try to get ahead of some of the safety issues down there. You know, a lot of people bring a lot of resources, you know, in the river bottom throughout the whole county. So it's kind of all these different things are coming together and hopefully we'll start seeing time turning.
Also,
Yeah, speaking of safety concerns, I think one of our primary safety concerns, living close to the river bottom. And my wife and I have been here since '91. We actually live at the end of Riverview, next to the Rookville Golf Course. You know, last several years have been drought years, so we've had a lot of fires. And, you know, unfortunately, homeless people, they'll set up camps in there. And I believe the last fire we had was started by homeless people.
We've had a couple.
The fire that we lost the nature center to, the actual building, was started by a police chief. It was a car, are you guys aware of that? Yeah. Car went up into the garage.
Getting the homeless.
Yeah.
That's the part of the task force I was talking about with like the county at all different levels. So with all the different fire agencies involved in it too, CAL FIRE, so the city of Riverside, everyone come together to kind of get it figured out. And I think one of the first spots they hit was Fairview.
The city of Cooper Valley also gone in with an ordinance to ban the living in the river bottom on our side.
That's
You
the
know.
question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll be able to speak to that.
I know cities around are starting to do that though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, you know, in an effort to move this conversation forward, I'm gonna put a pin in safety, a big pin, basically saying that the intent is to run through this, for it to run through the project top to bottom, and that the partners themselves already are engaged, not just at this project, but in other ways within the community. But if safety is a top priority for you and you think it's something that you also have potentially ideas that you can contribute to, you know, what makes a site safer and or you're concerned. I'm gonna ask comment cards, or feel free to send an email or add a note, because I don't want to stop the conversation, but I'm gonna keep it moving forward. But I appreciate that all of this has been outstanding already.
It can add to my chicken.
And yes, so, yes, these are important, listen, this is really just the beginning of this master planning process, and we've had fire conversations many times, and actually one of the things that Chris and I, really since we worked together, have talked about with restoration and fire is, the more we restore native vegetation, generally the lower burns occur. So most of the non-native vegetation that occupies the river bottom is more fire prone, and with that, it actually results in more habitat conversion, and it is not uncommon for high quality native vegetation to be where fires end. And so, but certainly access for fire management at this site will be something else that's really important and will be talked about. So this is a conversation that we'll keep going. Okay, with that in mind, we are going to move on to our first exercise, which is really, I'm sure you've already been able to tell, a lot of us have been talking about this for a while. So we already have some of our own ideas. And what we want to do today is really add your ideas to our ideas. And so behind Chris and on the other wall, we have kind of, how many do we have? 5 major categories. And within those categories, we've called out kind of some unique elements that we think should be considered in this discussion. And what we want to know, same as the previous question, is what's missing? What do you think is missing? And so this is going to be a less walk around thing and more of a shout out kind of a thing. And we're going to, if people will bear with me, we're going to ask for like quick shout outs. Like give me your 4-word summary of what you think is missing. So for example, we'll start with buildings and facilities. And I'm sure when Chris printed these, they looked huge on the screen, and now the words are like, so I'm going to read to you. So we're going to read to you.
It's basically all these things.
Oh, that's true. Yes, it's these things, but they're grouped, which I actually really appreciated your grouping. So we've got buildings and facilities. So the Nature Center was lost, unfortunately, a few years ago, and that was a really big hit for, you know, not just the history that was in the building and came with the building, but for our kind of planning So with that in mind, we certainly want to bring back that type of a resource, not just from an educational perspective, but offices and so on. So we have, I think, 7 things listed right now. And I can't think of any better way of doing this than me literally reading these out loud. And you want to read them out loud?
I don't know if it's hard to.
No, I got it. It's a good. I'm going to read these out loud. If you can digest them and let us know if you think something's missing. If you say something that sounds like something that's already on there, we might just put a little check next to it or add to it because we want to still keep this list as tight as we can. So for example, we have a visitor center, an exhibit hall, community room, picnic areas, a shared field station. So that's, we have a lot of people potentially doing research on site or restoration or, even on-site management. And so that's that kind of shared space. Classrooms, greenhouses, equipment storage, and a caretaker residence. So those are kind of like building facility categories or elements that we've put out. And I'm happy to read them again because I don't know how to do it any differently than this. But was there anything in your mind when you think of building and facilities that you didn't hear captured in one of those major categories?
I assume the visitor center has restrooms.
I think that's a good, it will, but it is
As a lady of a certain age,
Yes.
it's important to me, I like it.
I think it's very important. I like that. No.
Well, I was wondering about that too, since the restrooms are still there, but what about additional restrooms like further down in other parts of the property?
Correct. Well, actually, that's a really good point in general. So right now, this is not tied to any one particular geography. So whether those restrooms stay or not, we don't know yet. I'm not saying they're going or not because it costs money to put them there, but there's a solid chance the visitor center will not go back physically where the visitor center was for a variety of reasons, but we can talk about that big picture. So when you're thinking of this, don't feel limited to what you know about the site currently. Think, about that. But that is good to know. Even restrooms in different locations is something, a good question mark. So, great. Any other buildings, facilities? Anything that, yes?
Will there be any evening lighting down there, will there be street lights installed?
I don't have the answer, but I think we will put that on the list as a question. I'm going to go back and then come back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Nowadays, we could go solar with some of that,
Yes.
which was not something we had access to in the past.
Why don't we do solar and just energy efficiency in general? Because that's the thing. Right now we've said visitor center, but we haven't defined, like we could dive way into what's going to be in that visitor center. So I think that's great.
One more thing.
Yes.
I'd like to see something that is prepared for like community day events.
From an event side.
From an event side with, of course, a nature component.
Yeah, we don't really have an events category, do we, Chris? Yeah, I'm thinking we might just make one.
And that's a big part of one of the goals on site is.
Do you want to change it education to education
Stewardship
slash
day and the concept.
stewardship day?
Maybe not exactly how it used to be done, but definitely continuing that tradition. I love that idea. So that's in the plan.
So we're going to add that to, we have an education stewardship category, and we can read you guys what's under that, but we will add community event to that. You were up next, and then I see
So what about like an amphitheater or a big outdoor
space.
meeting type space?
Sure.
I mean, we had that little one before behind it, those are really.
And it's, I don't know, have you been there recently? I've been shocked at how cleaned up that space is. But
Make sure, type of day where people can give, you can get someone to come out and give evening.
And there is an amphitheater right now, it's small, but that's one of the things that survive the fire. But maybe thinking about making that usable even in more extreme weather. When it's hot, I'm not sure where we're gonna use that without some.
Or even into the early evenings, what would it look like to
Or
access?
That's to get into lighting.
Like she said, we're not tied to the, whatever, but
Correct, it might not be
the
that.
idea of that kind of a
Yes.
space, that's really a useful space.
Definitely.
I want a telescope. Can you write that down?
It's not a building, how about a planetarium?
Oh, yeah.
That's the.
Sue, did your hand go up?
no, I was.
Okay. I saw a few hands. Yes.
Related to that, I'm not sure what all you've thought about with the field station, but definitely the amphitheater area could also be used by people using the field station, because if they're gonna come out with a team, they might need to talk to the whole group together before they
For
do
sure.
something, and so I can see that being.
Connection between
important
that.
too.
I like that. I see half hands, so I'm going to the.
Under events, I can tell you, one of the funnest times my family and I have had is taking the kids to the haunted trail. I haven't done that for quite some time.
Okay, so we'll write haunted trail down and we'll try and, I think, maybe Chris, we can put a star next to it, because what do you have?
Decoration.
Sure, haunted, I mean, yes. So I feel like we might need another board. We'll take one of these Post-its and put it up, because there are a lot of you that have memories of the site, and I think that's a really powerful thing with this location. So when we move into our next group exercise, there's gonna be opportunities to potentially write things on the ground, like if you have a favorite tree or a favorite spot or something, you can write these things on maps. But I think we also want to put, if you're comfortable, put things that are important to you, memories that you've had of the site up there. If you don't want to write it in a public setting, comment card. And I mean this in a very serious way. When we wrote the proposal, I literally was like Googling the site to try and find people who like yelped it. And I only found like 3 people, and I was like stalking them through Facebook, because it was like, I came here when I was a kid and went to camp, and now I'm older and my kid, and those are just really powerful, and we want to figure out how to bring those into the site. So please feel free to share those in general, both from big picture categories, but also we'll start a memory page. Yes?
I'd like to say something that, there's some history on the wasps and the history regarding the use of Native Americans, and that being a place to cook and to gather, and it was very sacred. So I researched that, and
Yeah.
I haven't found too much information, but I know there is.
We've been doing the same.
So, and I think at one time there was one event where they had members of the Tonga tribe there, and I'd like to see that more, because I think that would also help and letting people understand how important it is to preserve that particular area, especially from like vandalism and that kind of stuff, because it just gives it meaning.
No, that's been a continual conversation and research dive into this site in general. So yeah, I think whether it's education, we've even talked about just bringing in traditional ecological knowledge into, potentially doing native landscaping and sharing the history of those plants and their, relationship to the tribes that use the site. So I think that's great. So Chris, I saw you add that under education. And is there a grinding rocks? Do we have I thought we had, maybe it didn't make it up.
I saw it in some of your literature.
It definitely is in there. It might not have made this
mention
list.
grinding rock, we just kept it under history.
Yeah, okay, I wasn't sure if
Protection
we,
historic artifact.
perfect, okay.
It's down.
Providing a spot for Native Americans in the exhibit hall.
For sure, yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
for information, yes.
Yeah, all stories of like historical context too we're interested in. I mean, like we know about a few, like because of the rocks, we've been in contact with some talking about like the importance of the site to like local Chinese history and stuff. So if there's any other stories out there too that you guys have heard about, I'm definitely interested in trying to preserve all that, knowledge.
So I think let's move on to Marcus in the back, and I have a feeling we'll catch some more. Am I like really in people's space if I'm like right on this camera? Okay, I can't read it. Marcus, what's the first category?
Agriculture.
Agriculture. So this is kind of Puerto de Valle and this like overlap of, sustainable kind of farming and soil practices. People have thoughts about that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm very against pesticides.
Okay. Do you want to write no pesticides, a question mark, but yes, I would say that is aligned, at least certainly with how Puerto de Valle focuses on things. Marcus, what does it say under there right now? What are the other two we have?
We got beacon grove restoration and agroforestry.
Agroforestry. So those are two really big categories. Yeah.
Folks familiar with like the agroforestry term?
No.
Derek, you want to throw it? I can.
It's the, go ahead.
I figured you got a better handle.
Well, anyway, it's the idea of using, creating an ecosystem out of edibles. Instead of just row crops and it's this monoculture, you create a mix that is mutually supportive. and is beautiful. So
And
you get
provides
both.
like wildlife
Yeah,
support
yeah.
also, you know.
Yeah, right. So you get
Soils,
beautiful-
right?
Insects are involved, so it functions like an ecosystem that we
Yeah.
create.
Definitely focuses on healthy soils, you know, it's really that kind of holistic
Right, so that,
concept.
no-till farming, so you're not raising a lot of dirt, dust, there's not a lot of energy inputs into it. And you end up with something that works as part of a park, not just this sort of separate field.
I'm gonna toss,
Why are they cutting down the trees on Riverview?
Oh, on the property itself?
It's not on your farmland.
Okay.
Oh, it's not.
It's an
Oh.
adjacent.
Yeah, not on our park. Well, there are some trees that have to come down because they're diseased or damaged, and could fall and hurt someone if we're branching.
I was just wondering, Jim.
Will you guys plant new trees?
Yes, definitely.
So you're thinking of actually going and replanting pecans to replace the dying orchard?
Well, so I think there's a conversation, that's one of the conversations we want to have here is better understanding. In our previous meetings, there was, you know, a lot of memories shared about the pecan grove, people collecting pecans, pecan harvest festival. And so we're kind of at that point where the pecan grove is close to living out its life. And the question is, how do we maintain that history and maintain, but maintain that in a sustainable way? So it might include replanting and or salvaging those trees that can continue to be salvaged and managed. It might also include, it could also include, and this is where your opinions are great, other edibles. So, yes, there are native walnut trees and other walnut species. There are, you know, potentially fruit. There's a lot of different things that could come into the site. So I think one of the questions for the group, and I feel like I might be slightly steering us farther down a path than I want, but you know, right now the pecans kind of cover the site in a lot of different areas. So we've talked about potentially kind of focusing that in one area so that we can focus on restoration and other types of uses in the other area, but really making that a manageable space and also a place of education. So, you know, we all look at trees and we say, oh, they're dying, you know, what can be done? And sometimes trees just have a lifespan, you know, and so that's the kind of things we want to make sure we're educating that back out to the community.
So as odd as this may be, there is a large showy moth that's a subspecies endemic to Southern California. It was on the native walnuts, and it has actually got a substantial colony here that you don't
In the
see
pecan
for a
grove,
long
or-
ways in other areas in Southern California, and it's because of these pecan orchards.
Nice.
So I've actually been trapping moths in that area for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years.
Nice.
But,
reference name for the one?
the moth is Catocula pediatrix.
Katakula.
Yeah, Catocula. Look up underwing moth. Pediatrix. And it's a very cool, there's some really neat stuff. And I was bringing insects into the nature center.
Well, that's
I
great
used to bring
information.
in collections when I forget Cheryl would have her. But a comment I want to make along this line is that it almost seems that, given that you're sort of retooling here, this is an opportunity for you to establish a really good operational native plant nursery.
Yes.
Not just for, you know, nicey show the public some native species, but a really industrial strength operational to basically support all of the habitat restoration that might be going on all up and down. So you might have an acre.
Yes.
So are we talking about maybe plant propagation?
So we put,
Yes.
right now we have greenhouse as a very big
Yeah,
category.
this is, we've got
But yes.
some of the Palos Verdes Peninsula, for example, the Palos Verdes Peninsula Land Conservancy.
Yeah.
They've got a big, I'm gonna say it's a couple acres or maybe a little less, where they've just got full-time employees that are just growing everything that
Yeah.
they use in all their habitat restoration all over the peninsula.
That's definitely something we talked
It's
about.
a great thing to have it that handy.
Keep the local genetics.
Yeah, and also those are great opportunities for students. So, you know, having students who
Yep.
connect with things, yes.
Okay, I see the park as a special place for wildlife. And so when we start talking about doing agricultural things there, that kind of takes away from the wildlife things. I think we have to keep that in mind also.
Okay.
I go there a lot. I'm not sure if you start planting plants there that are edibles, that they're gonna survive the first wave of the boars.
Yes.
I mean, they're, you know,
Wild boar is a whole nother issue.
Well, we should, yeah.
I don't know if anyone can get, it's
Where-
hard to get rid of them.
No, but it-
You could really take a dent on those if you got professionals.
yeah.
It is something we need to manage too, though.
But my point really is, it's an area for wildlife. Okay, there are lots of areas where there have been organic farms around here that are vacant now. Which would be
I know, I've been watching this pecan orchard die, and I've been salivating at the idea that we could go back in and put the upper bench native sycamores and oaks and, you know, elderberries and have that, because that marginal habitat for the river. You know, you got the river bottom with willows and cottonwoods, and it's pure riparian.
Yeah, yeah.
And this upper bench
Transitional area, yeah.
has been developed, and so many of our riparian corridors lack that buffer zone that used to have that transition between the sort of coastal stage and the shrub lands that you see in hillsides, and these almost savannas. And there's a little tiny taste of it, there's a little relic of it when you drive out here past the county building, and you see those giant sycamores that are 300 years old. And those belong in the same place that those pecan orchards are.
They do. So I want to give a few things, because I think everything you're saying is exactly when we talk about a shared vision, right? So when we say agroforestry, we're not talking about the whole, 60-acre sunny slope. We're talking about identifying a specific location where that makes sense, where it's appropriate, where we can educate. And exactly what you're talking about with transitional areas, when we've talked about the site and plant palettes, it's pretty much every species you've mentioned. Marcus just dropped 60 oaks that he's been raising for the last 2 years into the site a month ago. Planted. So, we collected a lot of those oaks from the very nice oak tree at the site. So it's bringing a lot of this together. Some of the reason we want to bring it together is, once again, thinking about the community and thinking about the knowledge that you have about wildlife, the knowledge that you have about this transitional area, but bringing that to the general public, because people don't learn about that unless they experience it. And so we look at this site as an amazing opportunity to bring this all together. So our future exercise, we're going to actually go to a map. And so if you feel comfortable and have an opinion about where the visitor center should go, we have an opinion, but we'd be curious to hear your opinion. Yes?
I strongly support the last speaker there. There's a lot of good ideas and a lot of things we could use, but this is a really special access place to the river bottom for the public, and a special place to experience nature, which we don't have anything else right here in the valley. And so you have to be careful about having too much built things that would keep away from that. It would be maybe a good idea to, if you're going to only have one pecan grove, maybe the other one can become sycamores and cottonwoods and things like this. I think push it in the direction of nature and access to nature. And some of these other things are a little bit secondary and shouldn't take up all the space.
Okay, I like that. I have no clue how to write that in our list of things, but secondary.
Well, or balance.
We need to rank our priorities.
Well, and I think when you get to the map, so there are places within other developed that have already been impacted.
Correct.
That's more what you're talking about for some of these things, not the open space.
Correct.
One would hope that what's currently open space habitat is not impacted at all. That any footprint goes into, like those,
the bare kind of foul areas.
Bare ones,
Yes, so and the great thing is everything you guys are saying is coming from a place of both, kind of a passion for this site, but also it's very logical. So far, almost everything everybody's said in my mind melds beautifully together, which is very exciting in my opinion. No, that's it's 6:55, folks, but I'm not going anywhere, but we'll talk more. Yes, stand up.
What we're looking at here is some very out-of-the-box thinking, and I am fascinated by that. We're saying done correctly, all these things can go together.
They can, yes.
My sister lives in the 8,000-foot level of the Rocky Mountains. Magnificent garden. The deers don't bother it because she has a foot of marigolds around the garden.
Yeah.
So there's so many different ways that, in my yard, it's all experiment. I really want classes And I didn't know what agroforestry was, but it's what I do.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And it's fun. It's really fun, and it's going back to the way life should be. So thank you.
Way.
Perfect, has a couple good thoughts. Okay.
So did we with our kids.
Nobody had to.
We're not 65.
So we're gonna pause for just a minute because we actually have a member of our partner organization, Puerto de Valle, is on the magical Zoom box through this little robot-looking guy, and he's been providing some comments via text, and so we're gonna share a little bit of that because I think he's gonna have some added context to this.
Oh, so Miguel was just asking if there's going to be a meeting area for indigenous peoples, and if there will be a structure with their input where they could provide community meetings for the different tribes.
Yes.
And what's the, how will tribes be involved in the planning? He wants to know.
Okay, so those were 3 tribal questions. One was the kind of potential meeting location for tribes. I felt like the first 2 sounded similar.
Yeah.
Was both kind of, and then the second was how will they be involved? So I think the meeting location spans the larger group, but I'm going to go to the second question, which is how will they be involved? And the goal is to involve local tribes as much as possible. What we've been working on is identifying the appropriate tribe. So this location is an interesting place that intersects quite a variety of kind of tribal boundaries. What was that?
Sherman Institute.
Sherman Institute. I will check in with someone who's been doing more of that. But yes, so we've been trying to identify the appropriate tribal group to engage because it's at an intersection of a few. In fact, at one point we had heard that it was an important location for meetings of multiple tribes. And so we have a very strong interest in bringing that in and potentially even identifying a partner tribe to add to the group. We just haven't gotten to the right place yet, but that is a top priority, I would say, for the group. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock or 2 minutes to 7. What I wanted to try and do, because I don't know how much we want to push it over or under, what we would like to do. So here was what we were going to try and do. I'm going to tell you what we're going to try and do, and then we're going to see what we can figure out how to make happen. So the goal was to potentially identify our top priorities, top 2 or 3 priorities. So like, is it wildlife? Is it the pecan grove? Is it education? Is it tribes, indigenous people that we want to then potentially vet out a little bit more? And in some ways, the conversation we've already had has been exceptionally productive. And we can elect to dive down those rabbit holes because the reality is that's what they are, and that's okay. So if people are interested in staying and diving down a rabbit hole or 2, we can pick a couple top priorities. I had this whole plan of you guys getting stickers and getting up, but that was when I thought there was going to be 10 of you, and now there's 50 of you, and so we have to adapt. But I think safety we're going to put in we're going to tackle that, and we're going to definitely continue that conversation. But I think I'm actually surprised, I'm going to say, to hear how much interest there was on nature and wildlife, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but previous meetings it's been sometimes we've been really strongly opinionated about pecan grove, or really, everybody's got opinions, and that is great, but that is a theme that I've not heard come out as much previously. So I'd potentially like to dive into that a little bit more if people have opinions on that, and then potentially the pecan grove. Given that we're talking about prioritizing wildlife, that means shrinking our focus on the pecan grove and agroforestry. And I'd love people's opinions on a map of where do you think that stuff should go? And we can tell you a little bit of I can give you a little bit of our ideas so we don't just, mark up everywhere on the map. So big picture concept has been potentially to pull a visitor center closer to the road, to give the creek more space, to give those oaks more space that are beautiful and we want to encourage to thrive closer to the creek, and to really make that area, the entrance point around the road, a place where vehicles and parking would happen, and for the rest of the space really to be passive and quiet, and maybe not quiet, I mean my kid's not quiet ever, but I'm not quiet. but really this kind of a space where people can get away if they elect to. So that's something we've talked about, but I'd love to hear on a map if anybody strongly disagrees and thinks the visitor center should be somewhere else. We've talked about focusing the pecan grove on the northern section because that's where I believe the most viable remaining exists, and that's probably similar to where the agroforestry would go. The idea with those would intermingle, so we wouldn't be moving into more natural space. And then from a restoration perspective, we've obviously talked about the creek. Many of us have been eyeing the cement ditch and figuring out if we can remove or give that creek a little more room. And then we have all of the Santa Ana and the unnamed tributary that comes out of Rancho Harupa. So those are, from a wildlife perspective, it's really, there's going to be a lot more, I think, that comes for future restoration conversations. But I'm trying to think of like where to go. I'm wondering if anybody has strong opinions different than anything I said. Yes.
I had a question about the entrance.
Yes.
Have you guys talked about the potential to move it across from Peralta, the end of Peralta, so there's one intersection? Because I feel like it's awkward. We have to turn and then you have to go into the park. And I feel like it might be a safer passageway, especially for people walking into the park if it was there. But I don't know if you've looked at that already and whether it's doable.
We haven't looked at it to that point, but we have talked about it in the same way. So I think we should definitely make sure that makes our list. So we want to have a really smart, you know, ingress, egress, especially if we're encouraging people to come to this site and many of you live in the neighborhood. We want to make sure that all of that kind of, you know, jives. So definitely
talking about the entrance, just throw this one out there for folks. We had right up here kind of we had been thinking of this maybe as like an ag field, essentially. It was kind of like a blank canvas for that. But standing up by the road, I mean, there's an amazing view, like looking out across this way. That could be a cool entrance too, kind of keep everything better.
But definitely, I like the idea of thinking, just because the entrance is where it is now, is not where it has to stay. And so that's something that we remind ourselves as we talk, and appreciate you guys thinking out of that.
The other thing, this isn't really so much related to the entrance to the park, but I actually hike in the park from past the bridge, past the trestle. So I'd love to see some signage entrance for people entering from the riverbed and from the...
That's great. What I would love for anybody in here who's hiking, horse, you know, we would love on one of these maps for you to potentially either point out key locations you're already using, even a trail, even if it's rough, but a trail that you're walking, or if there's an area that you wish that there was an access, or like you're saying, where you would like signage. So maybe we'll make one of these maps kind of trails, all of the above, and would love to get a couple points on the ground. And if you're not in a position to stay, if you would potentially give us your name and number and write trails, horses, or whatever, we will do some follow-up, because there's a lot more to come from this.
Saturday?
Yes.
Where exactly is the meeting?
The meeting is at basically the current entrance. We're going to go into the park.
I'm a little lost, even though I've lived here this long. The comment I had about the entrance,
Yes.
I like the idea, but the school is right there, and we all know how much school parking there always is at a school.
Yeah.
So that might cause some issues.
So separating them maybe, potentially.
Yeah.
That might be a good idea. Chris's idea of moving it clear up to the
Crazy moms out there. Just don't want to be anywhere.
In my opinion, you would want the center that you're going to build to be close to the entrance, so that
makes sense.
You know, whoever is in the center kind of keeps an eye on who's coming in.
Who's coming and going. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, no, we've definitely talked about kind of talking about traffic studies, and you know, not in the formal sense, although ultimately if we do environmental documents, we will be showing a traffic study. So that will definitely inform some of this. Marcus, you had your hand
I was just going to emphasize that in the recreation we have a trail. Used for hiking and also a egress.
The other thing I want to mention we haven't brought up is we have talked about ADA compliance and less the traditional word, just accessibility. So whether it's accessibility for youth groups, whether it's accessibility for people who need different access requirements. You know, the whole site might not be 100%, but we want to make sure we have a solid amount of trails that are very usable for a wide variety of people. We want some of those trails ideally to go through more natural spaces, maybe some of those trails to go through more kind of xeric garden and education and how do you do native plants in your space, and butterfly gardening. And you know, so so those are things we've talked about. I'm just putting that out there so you know they're on the table. Not on the table, they're being considered and will be factored in.
And then trails too, you know, talking about, we got the, like, for scale context too, right? This is 40 acres. All told, this whole thing is like 330 acres. And there's already, like, you guys know this, I'm sure, but like, you know, a network of trails out in here. And so beyond the habitat restoration in these areas, we really want to do like the trails, educational signage, you know, directions, like you were saying, how to get back to the nature center, how to get to the regional park too.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of the use of the center of our park is to get to the trails in the rest of the natural area there.
Yeah, I've seen you walk around.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, the dogs. Yes. We met last time I was on site, I didn't put face to.
But I also see a lot of people riding horses.
Yes, which is great, and,
That's good to hear, because that was one of the ideas,
Yeah.
like, all right, we can maybe kind of connect the two, you know, what you can't get here, you can get here, and vice versa, but there's a reason not to do that, so.
yeah, I was shocked when we did a group visit the other few weeks ago, and we walked from Louis Robidoux to Rancho Harupa, which I teach a wet known class at times, and I'd use both sites, but I didn't realize how much I could walk. I had no clue I could walk between them the way we did.
That's my morning walk.
Barbara back here took us years, you know.
Yeah, so those are the kind of things, like, that's where this master plan at the scale that it is, it's more than just Louis Robidoux Park. It's how do we now connect this into this regional, you know, area. So those are, once again, if people have a moment and are up for putting, you know, notes on a map, we'll compile them. You know, if you can write on the map or post it. So I think that's a big one, trails, recreation, just giving us your information, like what do you know in your brain so that we're not missing something. Same thing, don't forget any missing groups, or you had your.
I had two questions.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that the Pecan Grove would be mainly, at least that what you guys are talking about, on the north end.
That's what we
So where
talked
the
about.
existing formal looking aged trees are and more, or just that block right now?
So I'm gonna point at things just to make sure I don't even know if I can reach them. Here.
Okay.
Is that what you were telling, the
Yes.
formal area where the kind of roads?
Yep.
So I think the idea would be to focus on that area and the area immediately north that's more of like a fallow kind of lot right now for our pecan grove and agroforestry. So the idea of like, do we want to bring in some fruit trees? Do we want to bring in other, you know, our native walnuts and, you know, create kind of more of a, still once again a walking area, but a walking area with that understory and overstory of edibles. The area down here, because there are still quite a lot of pecans in this area. Right now, we've talked about that being more native trails, sycamore, oaks, and really kind of giving some of that space back to the river. The other thing is, so this is Sunny Slope right here. Sunny Slope is exceptionally incised. What that means is the creek used to be more like a bowl like this, very shallow, and it's now like this. So, and it's because it's like a fire hose. There's all of the development upstream, it all goes right down that trapezoidal channel, and it just rips through that area. So it cuts down, and that really impacts the ecology of the site. So we want to give the creek potentially back some space to move. And the exciting thing about that is that creek, even though we only have this little stretch left before it hits the Santa Ana River, it supports multiple endangered species. So giving more creek bottom back to that space, and still making it an area where people can access, because there's nothing better than kids getting access to creeks. So
I had one more comment.
yes, and then we'll head back.
Okay, so the other thing is in the design architecture of the new nature center.
Yes.
It'd be nice to create something that it blends in with this nature component.
Good point.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, what I was gonna add was
Nicely
that, sustainable buildings and all of that kind of stuff into whatever you build.
Yes, we wrote solar energy, but maybe sustainability kind of out there, it's all right.
I think in the building codes are gonna generate some of that on that.
Some of it will, but we definitely want to be a hallmark for that, another place where people can learn. Yes.
Just on the building, one appreciate one thing is as fire safe as possible. There's been more than one fire in the river bottom.
Yes.
The second thing is, I was more in the last one, I think, exposed wood on the outside.
Yes.
And some of them was really bad in the river bottom, or termites.
That makes sense as well. Yes, but yes, fires, okay, I see Manny's already got that down. No, I think that's outstanding. I'm trying to,
You guys have touched so much in a productive way. I'm so proud of you guys. Yes.
I'm thinking on that, in that way, that if you had like your walking trail, and then you had like ice plants, and then you, to protect, like as a fire break, to protect like the tree grove on this side, and then, you know, so that you could have like fire break, fireproof kind of plants that
Sure.
adjacent to the walking trails to protect.
Yeah, so there are a lot of native plants that we can use that have the same benefits potentially as ice plant, which there's a lot of good debate around ice plant, but for this site, there's a lot of great native plants that can do what you're talking about, which is using kind of that, using plants to provide that appropriate buffer. But I think also setting it further back from the river and the wild space will help. So yeah, I think our plant palette will definitely be informed by some of that. What time is it? 7:11. I don't know if people are up for hanging around. I saw your hand pop up.
The only question is, because there is so much and this is so amazing, I'm so glad that you guys are all doing this.
Yes.
I'm so thankful. Is there going to be a plan to set up more meetings in person, or how workable is the website? Or is it interactive enough to handle a lot of, because there's so much stuff out there that I'm just amazed at all the ideas.
Well, that's a really good question. We weren't sure who wanted to come to this meeting. We didn't know, literally, we didn't know how much food to order, the room size or anything, and the fact that people are so interested. We have this plan tonight, and then Saturday from 11 to 1, we have a second community-focused meeting at Louis Robidoux. If you haven't been there for a while, there are some new trails, there's a parking lot, it's a beautiful caretaker, kind of temporary but still nice residence. There's new signs you can put up. We'd love to, we're gonna have staff on site to give you a tour, but Lindsay will be doing a second exercise like this, only it'll be outside. Wear your jacket, 59 is the high. It's not gonna be raining, it's gonna be cold. But maybe one of the things we can look at, because one of the things Lindsay said is we'll kind of take cues from tonight to think about Saturday, and maybe one of the things we want to think about is, do we want another structured meeting like this? Like, how do people want to give feedback?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who shows up. And then, I can't remember, for the master plan, is there a point where we do a transitional kind of report out gathering, or does it move from this to,
I think that we were gonna figure out, depending on reaction and the amount of feedback we're getting, enthusiasm, how we're gonna structure the next, and when the next meeting would be, but it looks like we're gonna have another.
Yes. I was thinking of possible subgroups with you all, or subgroups with the people. Like, it sounds like there's a lot of people that we're all gonna be interested in all of it, but it sounds like there's a lot of expertise and a lot of subgroups that could be started for individual interests that everybody could, not that we don't need all the input about everything, but that we could just continue knowing kind of how it's going and where people could fit in if needed.
Yeah. I think, so I'm pretty sure most of you, if not all of you, signed in and put your emails. And so I'm hoping, Mandy, one of the outcomes is that we can be kind of maybe doing a report out to those people that have come and expressed interest in meetings, in addition to the website. And I think what we can do is use that list to potentially, as we dive in deeper into some of these topics, to reach out to request individuals that might have additional input. And once again, if you're somebody tonight that you're like, okay, I have more thoughts on this one particular thing, and you want to make sure that you have a little more one-on-one time to share that with us. One, you can come on Saturday and hang out with us. But two, you can also give your name and number. You can just put a little note, call me about horse trails, or whatever you would like. But it is planned for the master plan to have another public-facing moment, probably kind of in an intermediate stage where we can take all of this that we've come together and kind of give you I hate to use the word dartboard, but to give you something that you can then provide more active feedback on specifically, potentially within the constraints that we've talked about tonight.
I've lived in, right across the street from the nature center for the past almost 30 years. And I remember the times going to on the trails and then used to the center and the schools coming down, and it was just a wonderful time. This past few years, when we see the grading of things and, with this lack of funding and all this other kind of stuff. I gotta get going. I brought my grandson because we're gonna be neighbors for a long, long time. And everything that happens across the street is important to us, whether it's something we totally approve of or don't approve of, it affects us every single day. The traffic that goes through, the fires when we have to go, all of those things, the heat wave that we have, it's all concerning because we happen to have a well. And I'm constantly thinking about, okay, what happens with the drought? It gets worse. How is everything going to happen with being able to get into water and that kind of thing? So it's for us, and the reason why I brought my 3 grandsons is because they're going to have to be responsible for knowing what goes on, because we've been there and we don't plan on moving. We love it. Yep. And the nature center was part of our dream. Yeah. When I first bought my house, we sat on the blocks and we looked across the street at the house and saying, we're going to move into there in a couple of months. And we were just, that was where we would go and sit on the rocks. I didn't realize all the history of the rocks at that time, but that was our cursing place with me and my younger girls, because these guys don't know about that. But we got to get going because we got homework to finish up. And I'm glad that we're having these meetings. We can't come to every single one, but at least we know I've looked at the website and gotten some good updates. But like I said, part of the thing, and I'm not just saying because we're across the street, because everybody that lives along that line and our neighbors and even the people that live further down, we've all seen it grow. And it's good to know that there's a master plan going on there, because we want to see it come back. And if it comes back different, if it comes back better, that's even, to all our advantage. So we're vested in making sure that it's a safe place too, because sometimes it got a little scary. So, anyways, we're going to.
Wait, before you go, let's just go through the raffle.
Can I add to their statement real quick?
I was just gonna say, if your grandsons are comfortable, not tonight, but another time, I really think youth input is really important as we move through this. Some of us are looking at this through the lens of what we hope our kids will use, but we'd also really love their input. And so, if they feel comfortable writing notes or calling or showing up on Saturday or another day, I think it's really important to understand, how many times we've been there and seen people taking prom pictures, or, there's a lot of things that we're not going to capture in a meeting like this, but would love, to hear. So continuing to get perspective from a wide range of folks, including your grandson, would be good. So yes, Martin had one little
I have one real quick one, based on what Anita just said. One of the things in the placement of the building, I think that's a critical piece on that frontage road, because there's only a few neighbors that are truly going to be affected by that building. I think placement is important, because I think a lot of us that live directly in front of that nature center would not want another building put in front of them to take that natural view away. So that's something to think about.
Think about how that building, okay, no, that makes a lot of sense.
What do you think about
Oh, who did get a raffle ticket?
There's no resident that can be affected.
Gabby,
Well, no, I'm talking on the
Anybody, while we're grabbing another raffle ticket, anybody have any final kind of pieces? And we're hoping you'll all stay engaged and, bother us as much as we hope to bother you.
Aaron, I'm just gonna put your name on it. Did anyone else get a raffle ticket?
You're going Saturday. Oh, no, you're not. It's except for wedding.
And again, thank you all for, this was one of the more productive community meetings I think I've ever been at. And I mean that in a very great way. I think it shows a lot about your community. So, thank you all for contributing tonight. I'm super excited to be working.
Thank you for keeping us in the loop.
It's hard. Yeah, well, hopefully if you're up for